just perspectives from watching all of that evolve? In some ways, is it kind of like what you said, Brian, gaming's always popular and it's always growing. You just only notice it in certain ways. Or have you also seen that this is now a new evolution because the blockchain space, because you can now play inside and outside of that gaming universe?
Yeah. So one of the things about the big shifts in gaming growth has been, first of all, it has been just acknowledging that, there's a kind of skill needed for gaming to play with a fun entertainment device that was interactive. Those were the console wars in the early days, Atari, then Sega, then Nintendo, right? All these devices that came out, Sony PlayStation, the first generation. And then it hit a bit of a sort of slower growth. And that slower growth happened because the gaming sort of wasn't the hardware limitation anymore. It was a limitation of skill needed to play the game. Meaning that in order to play a game well, in sort of, around 2007 and 8 and 9, that period of time, pre-smartphone gaming, you needed to know how to use a console controller, which had many buttons and it was kind of complicated, right? And so it became sort of really much more what people define as hardcore gaming. People who play almost professionally, even though the esports industry really didn't exist. And so it started slow growth, and we're talking about hundreds of millions of gamers, but not yet billions. And then the smartphone came about. And the real innovation that the smartphone delivered to gaming wasn't the fact that it was a game in the pocket. That was, of course, part of the access. But, the Nintendo already had a portable game device with the Game Boy way before that. So portable gaming already existed before the smartphone. It was the fact that you could play a game and be really good at it through the swipe of a finger. If you remember Angry Birds or even things like Candy, what it really did was it completely amateurized gameplay. So suddenly we found a market where there were actually billions of people who loved playing games, but couldn't play the games because they were just too difficult. And sort of similar to what Instagram did to photography, the smartphone actually did that to gaming at large, where basically game designers had to now create fun and engaging games where the skill level was essentially easy to get into, but obviously difficult to master. And it then got people into things like, Candy Crush or like Clash Royale, or obviously Angry Birds as the originator of Omnitus. These were simple gameplay, but a lot of fun to play and very easy for someone to get into. And that's how the gaming industry grew from hundreds of millions of players to 2.7 billion today. But there are 5 billion people or so that are online today. And because everyone has a smartphone today, there's actually basically a little more than 30 or 40% of the world, of the global internet connected world, that has had access to games, but still chooses not to play these games. Because for them, even the swiping of a finger or the interaction is either too tedious or not fun or not interesting. This is where this introduction of gaming and value becomes powerful, as we have seen with things like Rev Racing or Axie Infinity or even Sandbox, because now you can interact in the gaming world in financial value ways, in a more passive way. In other words, I can be involved in the game, but I don't actually have to play the game, because in order to be able to engage in this world, I need to be a good player still, right? There's still an amount of skill involved. It's a little bit like saying you can't actually play basketball unless you know how to shoot at least 10 hoops in a row, right? And that means if we do that, then actually we would be canceling out perhaps 2/3 of the audience, because we would never be able to qualify to be able to enjoy basketball because we can't meet that high bar, right? Now, that's kind of what gaming is today. So in order for you to engage in gaming, you need skill, right? Even if it's a simple skill, which smartphone has done, it's still too hard for some. Now, what if you entered a game where you could just watch it and you could actually maybe buy, your car and give it to someone else to race, and you can basically be excited about the outcome of the car? Or if you were, having a bunch of Axies and you actually were renting it out to other players who were using your Axies, you would be a participant in the game. You would be just as emotionally engaged, but it isn't your skill. To us, it's not just a paradigm of offering value to the gaming system and offering sort of economic value, but it's bringing in all the other people who wish they could engage in the gaming world, but couldn't because the skill level was too high. Well, guess what? Now I can passively engage.